The gentlelady yields. Mr. Biggs, the gentleman from Arizona, is recognized for question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so much of what I just heard is untrue. But what I would say, too, is, when you cast aspersions about the Inspector General Kafari, I wonder, did you read the report that he submitted for this? Did you read the report that we're discussing today?
I did.
Welcome back to America First, the channel where we put American citizens and American children first, always. If you're new here, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, because we're going to keep bringing you the truth that the mainstream media won't tell you. Ring that notification bell so you never miss when we expose what's really happening in Washington. Today I'm reacting to footage from a recent congressional hearing that should make every American parent's blood boil. We're talking about the Biden administration's complete and utter failure to protect nearly 500,000 unaccompanied children who cross our southern border. This isn't just government incompetence. Folks, this is a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions that happened on American soil under Joe Biden's watch.
I did.
No, I know you did. I wonder about the people who are telling lies about you, whether they did. And then they say, we can't believe a thing you said. Well, everything you said undermines what I think everybody on this committee should be worried about, and that is this horrible scourge of trying to find these kids who brought in and let in. I get just absolutely mind blown by people making these assertions. But have you been down to the border? I've been down to the border many times. I know you have, Mr. Kafari.
I have as well.
And have you brought people to the border? Have you interviewed people that are in detention? Have you interviewed children who come across without parents? This government, under Joe Biden, received hundreds of thousands of unaccompanied children. Is that fair to say, Mr. Kafari?
So the number is around 448,000.
And of those, do we know where all those 448,000 unaccompanied children are?
As of the date of the report, we did not. Like I mentioned, ICE and HHS are now going out in tandem to go and identify where these children are located.
Are you familiar with the case in Orlando, Florida, where 22 children at one time or another were placed with a strip club?
That's a new one.
Yeah. Well, that happened. And you know what? That's not the only time that type of thing happened. Multiple children going to the same address, which turned out to be vacant addresses. Is that right?
That's correct. There was one instance where our audit team, and I have some of those senior members here with me today, went physically out to look at addresses. There was one address where 35 unaccompanied alien children were designated to be, and it was a non-existing address.
Were there records kept about the vetting of the sponsors that were being placed, where these children were being placed under the Biden administration?
The change in the MOU between HHS and DHS in the summer of '21 removed the requirement for DHS to do the vetting. That vetting then fell on HHS to do, but it was only for the adult sponsor, not for all the individuals in the home.
And are you referring to the Mayorkas 2021 memo that deprioritized unaccompanied children cases, labeling them non-criminal?
I think that he issued that memorandum in the fall of '21. This is a change in an MOU that happened in the summer of '21 that predated that.
Okay. So Mr. Perry brought up offenses against children. And it doesn't take much to go to 18 U.S.C. Section 2251, and then also the aid and abet statutes, to realize that the policies, when you are labeling what's happening, the unaccompanied children, as non-criminal, if you've ever stood there and watched a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old come over in a group put together by a coyote with a 10-year-old not related to those two younger kids, bringing them across, you'd have to say there's some criminal conduct there. There is absolutely abuse of children going on there. That's what was going on wildly, often under the previous administration. And I'm sorry that you had to endure the BS that you've had to today. Your report is right, and I hope my colleagues read that report and tell me where any of it's untrue. And I will yield the balance, but I do have some UCs after you're done.
Gentleman yields the balance. I'd just like to point out to my colleagues that at any given time in American prisons, there are 750 to 850,000 incarcerated Americans that are parents of minor children. So when my colleagues discuss our efforts to keep families together during the deportation process, that's important. The gentleman yields his
I
time.
have some UCs,
The gentleman
sir.
has unanimous consent.
Thank you. This is a letter to Assistant Secretary Contreras from October 24th, 2022. Another one, July 15th, 2022, to Secretary Mayorkas and Secretary Becerra, signed by many members of Congress. Another to Secretary Becerra, dated September 10th, 2021. Another one to Secretary Mayorkas, dated March 3rd, 2021. Another to ORR and the Administration for Children and Families, dated February 24th, 2022, all asking questions about where these children were and the policies. Another is an article entitled "Tom Homan Details Search for 300,000 Kids the Biden Administration Lost." Another said ICE. This is another one dated from July 14th. ICE finds 10 unaccompanied migrant children at marijuana grow sites. Another one dated February 14th this year. ICE officers granted access to unaccompanied minors database. Another one from the New York Times stating alone and exploited migrant children work brutal jobs across the U.S. dated February 25th, 2023. Another one from April 17th, 2023 from the New York Times. U.S. was warned of migrant child labor but, quote, didn't want to hear it, close quote. And another one from May 8th, 2023, what we know about unaccompanied children arriving at the southern border.
Without objection, so entered into the record.
Let me break down what we just witnessed in this hearing, because the numbers are staggering and the negligence is criminal under the Biden administration. For 148,000 unaccompanied children entered our country illegally. Think about that number for a second. That's nearly 500,000 kids. And our government has lost track of where many of them are. These aren't statistics on a spreadsheet. These are real children, many of them vulnerable and alone. What we heard from Inspector General Horowitz in this hearing should terrify every American. The audit teams went out to physically verify where these children were placed, and what they found was unconscionable. 35 children were supposedly placed at one address that didn't even exist. Not a vacant house, not an abandoned building, but an address that simply does not exist. How does that happen unless there's systematic negligence or worse? And it gets more disturbing. We learned about a case in Orlando, Florida, where 22 children were placed with sponsors connected to a strip club. A strip club. Let that sink in. These are the people our government thought were suitable to care for vulnerable children. This isn't an isolated incident either. Multiple children were being sent to vacant addresses. Addresses that don't exist. Addresses where no responsible adult was waiting to receive them. The policy changes that enabled this disaster need to be understood by every American voter. In the summer of 2021, the Biden administration removed a requirement for the Department of Homeland Security to properly vet sponsors. They shifted that responsibility to Health and Human Services. But here's the kicker. HHS was only required to vet the adult sponsor, not everyone else living in the home. So you could have criminals, drug dealers, or human traffickers living in the same house as these children, and our government wouldn't know because they chose not to look. Representative Biggs made an excellent point about Secretary Mayorkas' memo that labeled unaccompanied children cases as non-criminal. This is the same administration that claims to care about children while simultaneously deprioritizing their safety and welfare. When you see 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds being brought across the border by coyotes with 10-year-olds who aren't even related to them, how can anyone with a functioning brain call that non-criminal? That's human trafficking. Plain and simple. The congressman also referenced federal statutes about offenses against children and aiding and abetting. This administration isn't just failing to protect these kids. They're potentially enabling their abuse through willful negligence. When you systematically remove safeguards and then lose track of hundreds of thousands of children, you're complicit in whatever happens to them. What's particularly infuriating is how some committee members try to deflect and make excuses during this hearing. The Inspector General presented cold, hard facts backed by thorough investigation, and instead of addressing the crisis, we heard political talking points and attempts to minimize the severity of the situation. This is exactly why Americans have lost faith in our institutions. The documents that Representative Biggs entered into the record tell the complete story, letter after letter to various Biden administration officials dating back to 2021, asking basic questions about where these children are and what policies are in place to protect them. The New York Times, hardly a conservative publication, has reported extensively on migrant children being exploited in brutal working conditions across the United States. These kids are being found at marijuana grow sites, working dangerous jobs, completely vulnerable to exploitation. This crisis exposes a fundamental dishonesty of the Biden administration's immigration policies. They opened our borders, created massive incentives for human trafficking, removed basic safety protocols, and then acted surprised when hundreds of thousands of children disappeared into the shadows of American society. This isn't compassionate immigration policy. This is systematic child endangerment on a massive scale. Every American needs to understand that this isn't just about immigration policy. This is about the basic responsibility of government to protect the most vulnerable. When our own government loses track of nearly 500,000 children and places them with unvetted sponsors, some of whom are connected to strip clubs and criminal enterprises, we're not talking about policy differences anymore. We're talking about gross negligence that enables child abuse and human trafficking. The fact that IC officers only recently gained access to the unaccompanied minors database tells you everything you need to know about this administration's priorities. They were more concerned with processing as many people as possible than ensuring the safety of children. That's not just wrong. It's morally reprehensible. As patriots who believe in America first, we have to demand accountability. These aren't just numbers in a government report. These are children who came to America and disappeared into a system that failed them completely. Some are being exploited in dangerous working conditions. Others have been placed with criminals, and many more are simply missing with no one in government seeming to care enough to find them. This hearing should be a wake-up call for every American voter. When government fails this spectacularly, when nearly 500,000 children can disappear into the system without proper tracking or accountability, we're not dealing with mere incompetence. We're dealing with policies and leadership that prioritize political messaging over the basic safety of children. The Inspector General's report that formed the basis of this hearing represents exactly the kind of government oversight we need more of. Independent, fact-based investigation that holds our leaders accountable regardless of party affiliation. The facts in this report are damning, and no amount of political spin can change the reality that this administration failed these children catastrophically. Moving forward, Congress must use every tool at its disposal to ensure this never happens again. We need mandatory tracking systems, rigorous vetting requirements that can't be waived for political convenience, and criminal penalties for officials who fail to protect children in government custody. We also need a complete audit of where every single one of these 448,000 children ended up. This is why elections matter, folks. This is why we need leaders who will put American security and child safety above political correctness and open borders ideology. The Biden administration's immigration policies didn't just fail the border. They created a pipeline for child exploitation that will have consequences for decades to come. If this video opened your eyes to what's really happening in Washington, make sure to share it with everyone you know. Hit that like button. Subscribe to America First. And let me know in the comments what you think should happen to the officials responsible for this disaster. We'll keep bringing you the truth, because someone has to hold these people accountable for what they've done to these children and to our country.